Article is related to Iran-Israel war, as US and Israel launched an all-out attack upon Iran. And in retaliation, Iran also sent a barrage of missiles upon Israel and also upon several US bases in the Middle East region, including in Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, etc. So we will discuss the chronology of events that led to the present situation, the legality of the strikes by Israel upon Iran, the impact of this war upon India. We will also look at the history of Israel because we have strong ties with Israel, but Israel also has a checkered history. And this is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. Let's first start with the chronology of the Iran-Israel ties. Let us start with the regime of Shah, the Shah in Iran. Reza Pahlavi, he entered into several contracts with Israel, popularly known as the oil for arms contracts, under which Israel was supposed to supply Iran with missiles, even ballistic missiles having a range of 700 kilometers, even capable of carrying nuclear warheads. In return, Iran was supposed to give the finances, some oil, and also provide Israel with the test sites. So Iran was getting the arms in exchange for finances and oil. But within 2 years of these contracts, there was a revolution in Iran, the 1979 revolution, which had the impact of having a geopolitical earthquake. Because the Shah regime in Iran was toppled because of the protests in Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in exile by then, he came back to Iran and he established an Islamic Republic in Iran. Therefore, they even gave the objective of the liberation of Jerusalem. They gave this support to the Palestinian cause because of two chief reasons. First, that it is a religious duty of Iran. Second, it was also considered a foreign policy imperative for Iran, because if Iran is able to unite the Shia Sunni sects, they will be able to win over the Muslim world. Then therefore the Iran comes up with the forward defense approach and hence establishes proxy networks in this neighborhood. It establishes a network of militias. For example, in the early 1980s, it supports the creation of Hezbollah. In Lebanon, the Shia movement was supported by Iran and hence the creation of Hezbollah. Therefore, Iran provided the Hezbollah with the finances, with the training as well as with the arms, and Hezbollah served as the proxy of Iran in the southern Lebanon region. And Hezbollah became so powerful that in 2000 Israel was forced to withdraw from the southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah therefore claimed that they were the first Afghan force to defeat the Israeli army. In 2006 Israel attempted once again. They attacked Lebanon, but once again in a month-long campaign Hezbollah survived. Then in early 2000s especially, the influence of Iran kept on rising, the regional influence. For example, in 2003, US invaded Iraq, Saddam Hussein was killed. The subsequent regime which came to power in Iraq, that was a Shia regime. The new ruling elite in Iraq was also having close ties to Tehran, leading to the expansion of the regional influence of Iran at that time in the early 2000s. At the same time, in the Yemen also there was a crisis which led to the rise of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who were again supported by Iran. Therefore, the influence of Iran grew in the backyard of Saudi Arabia as well. At the same time, at its home, Iran was simultaneously pushing for the nuclear enrichment, developing its own nuclear program. Therefore, the early 2000s was the era when the regional influence of Iran was rising, but it suffered certain setbacks as well. For example, in the 2010s, there were the Arab Spring protests, which led to the toppling of regime as well in several countries in the Middle East region. For example, in Tunisia, there was the toppling of the regime. There was an intervention in Libya. At the same time, there was crisis in Yemen. There were protests in Syria also. But because Syria was one of the few regional state allies of Iran, therefore, to curb the protests in Syria, Iran sent the Hezbollah fighters to support the Assad regime in Syria. But subsequently in 2015, the Russia came into picture and it provided the military support to save the Assad regime subsequently. But at the same time, there was a common threat for both Iran as well as USA. That is the threat of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Therefore, Iran and US came to a common ground to eliminate the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, because the ISIS was presenting a twofold threat to Iran also. First, it was having an anti-Shia ideology. Second, it was effectively eliminating the border between Iraq and Syria and capturing territories there. And Iraq and Syria, they were friendly regimes for Iran. Therefore, it cooperated with US for some time for the elimination of the ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And therefore, at that time itself, parallelly, there were negotiations for the nuclear deal with Iran, between Iran and the P5+1 nations, that is the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council and Germany, which led to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action known as the nuclear deal with Iran. In 2013, before that, Obama administration even held direct talks. After the election of Hassan Rouhani in Iran, there were direct talks which led to the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015 between the P5+1 nations and Iran. And according to this deal, Iran was supposed to scale back its nuclear program and not develop nuclear weapons. In return, Iran will not be imposed upon any sanctions, because since the early 2000s, when the nuclear program of Iran was at its peak and there were speculations that Iran is going to develop nuclear weapons, there were crippling international sanctions imposed upon Iran. Now, this deal was opposed by Israel. And in 2018, the Trump administration comes into picture. Trump withdraws US from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran was not directly violating the terms of the nuclear deal, but US withdrew from this deal, and therefore Benjamin Netanyahu even calls Trump the greatest friend of Israel. And upon the withdrawal of US from the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran again starts the enrichment of the uranium to develop nuclear weapons. Now, under Trump administration, there is further escalation, particularly under the second term of Trump, there is further escalation going for the maximum pressure campaign. But Iran does not yield. It goes for the maximum resistance, thereby providing more support to its proxies. It has several proxies in the region, for example, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, etc. Then comes the October 7, 2023. There is attack on Israel by Hamas. Now Israel declares its objectives that we will destroy Hamas, we will retrieve the hostages, and the vision of Netanyahu comes into picture. That is, he wants a unipolar West Asia with Israel as the central security power in West Asia, a unipolar West Asia, and at the same time he wants to roll back the Iranian resurgence so that there is no challenge from any of the Arab states, rather a unipolar West Asia, and simultaneously marginalize the Palestine issue as well. Now this is the period when there is a weakening of Iran's resistance, Iran's axis. For example, by December 2024, there is a collapse of the Assad regime in Syria as well, and Hezbollah has also weakened and it is isolated. Therefore, the Iran's forward defense approach, that is not working now, and therefore Iran starts indirect talks with the US administration. It promises as well as says directly that we are not seeking to develop nuclear weapons, we are in for the talks. But just before the US-Iran talks are to happen, on the eve of the talks, Israel starts bombing Iran in June 13, 2025, because Israel obviously does not want a US-Iran deal, even if it is just to scale back the nuclear ambitions of Iran, because it wants effectively a total disarmament of Iran, whereby it is not developing not only a nuclear weapon but also its military capabilities are cut back, and its capability to support the proxies in the region is also curtailed. Therefore, the post-ceasefire demands from the side of Israel and USA are that Iran end the nuclear program, which Iran is willing to do. It is willing to talk regarding the ending of the nuclear program, but there are other demands, including that it stops any missile productions and also stops any support for the non-state actors, for example giving support to the proxies, for which Iran was not willing to negotiate. This leads to the present situation, the crackdown, the all-out war in 2026. Even before that, in January 2026, there were protests in Iran. The protests were because of the falling currency in Iran, because of the economic sanctions. The Iranian economy was crippling. Some of the protests were alleged to have been triggered by the foreign interference, including from the US as well as the Mossad agents, the intelligence agency of Israel. Israel even observed that there are Mossad agents active and on the field in Iran, and simultaneously US was building the military presence in the Gulf region, and this military presence is the largest ever, the US military presence in the Gulf region since 2003, that is at the time when US had invaded Iraq. But at the same time, the diplomacy efforts were also continuing. There were talks being held with Iran through Oman, but they proved to be decoy talks to give a false sense of security to Iran that the diplomatic efforts may yield positive results. And now Israel has called these attacks as the preemptive strike, whereas Trump has said that the hour of your freedom is at hand. This is a signal to the Iranians that we want a regime change in Iran. We can observe that there are strikes by US and Israel across Iran, across several cities and towns in Iran, and in return Iran has also struck across several bases in the West Asian region. Let's also observe the timeline of the nuclear program of Iran simultaneously. Iran started the pursuing of the nuclear program for the first time in the 1950s, in 1957, and by 1990s it was pursuing agreements with China and Russia to support the nuclear research. But by early 2002, the National Council of Resistance of Iran had exposed the existence of two hidden Iranian nuclear sites. Therefore, in 2003, the diplomats started launching the intensive efforts to stop the Iran's program. Iran had agreed to keep the centrifuges only for energy, but it was in violation of the IAEA terms, the International Agency for Atomic Energy, and therefore in 2004 the IAEA even rebuked Iran for failing to commit to transparent reporting. Subsequently, there were several resolutions from the United Nations Security Council from 2006 to 2011 imposing sanctions upon Iran, and by 2015 the international sanctions had caused the Iranian economy to contract by 20% and the unemployment there also rose. And in 2013, after the election of Hassan Rouhani, the talks came back on track, and subsequently the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was also adopted by President Obama and the Iranian administration, but subsequently it was withdrawn. The US withdrew from it under the Trump administration. Now let's look at the chronology of Israel as well, because the Israelis, they were also not the original inhabitants of this region. The Jewish people there, they were also not the original inhabitants. The Jewish, they themselves immigrated there. The Jewish immigrants came to Jerusalem from various parts of the world. The Jewish immigration, popularly known as Aliyah, that happened because they were facing persecutions, particularly in European Union. Therefore, they started settling in Jerusalem. Now, when the First World War was about to happen, in the war against the Ottomans, the British wanted the support of the Jewish people. Therefore, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, he wrote a letter that came to be known as the Balfour Declaration, that they wanted the support of the Jewish people in the war against the Ottoman Empire. And in return, they promised the creation of a Jewish state there. After the First World War, therefore, this region became a British mandated territory. Palestine became a British mandated territory. And after the Second World War, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition Palestine into three regions: an independent Jewish state, an independent Arab state, and an international Jerusalem. This UN partition plan was opposed by the Arabs, but this was accepted by the Israelis. So what happened during the first Arab-Israeli war immediately after that was that immediately before the British mandate was to end upon that region, the Jewish Agency, which was created by the World Zionist Organization, that announced the creation of Israel, the state of Israel. The Jewish agency by then was the de facto administrative agency for the Jewish settlers in that region, and it announced the creation of the state of Israel. And Israel subsequently captured even more territories than was proposed by the UN partition plan. It captured 23% more territories. And the neighboring countries, they also took the advantage. For example, Egypt took the Gaza Strip during that time. And in 1967, subsequently, there was a 6-day war, and till then, all the Arab states, they were putting up a united face against Israel. Meanwhile, in 1964, there was the establishment of the Palestine Liberation Organization that was fighting for the cause of the Palestinians under Yasser Arafat. First, they were operating from Jordan, but the king of Jordan cracked down against the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and therefore they shifted to Lebanon. Then Israel invaded Lebanon, going after the PLO, and then they operated for some time from Tunisia also, calling for an intifada, calling for an uprising for the cause of the Palestinians. Therefore, this situation led to the Oslo Accords in 1993. Through the Oslo Accords, the peace process there, the creation of the Palestinian Authority was acknowledged by Israel, and it was proposed that there will be a two-state solution, but Israel did not give any actual land concessions even through the Oslo Accords as well. Now let us come to the present day and discuss the legality of the strikes by Israel upon Iran. Are they legal? First, let's look at the justifications of the strikes by Israel and US upon Iran. The justification given is self-defense. The self-defense is allowed under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, that if there is the question of self-defense, there is an armed attack upon any country, then it can go for an attack, a counter attack upon any other country also. So the justification given by Israel is that Iran goes for attacks through its proxies. Proxies, for example, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. And there is the threat of the nuclear weapons development as well, which will cause the threat of instability across West Asian region. Another justification is in the form of the preemptive self-defense or anticipatory self-defense. This is also borrowed from the Caroline Doctrine. As per the Caroline Doctrine, preemptive strikes are allowed if the threat perceived is instant, overwhelming, and there is no other choice, and there is no moment of deliberation as well. And it is said that since Iran was developing the nuclear program, therefore it was important. But now Iran was already in talks with US. It had promised that it is not having the intention of developing any nuclear weapons, and Trump had even announced after the war between Israel and Iran in June 2025 that they have obliterated the nuclear weapons development program of Iran. Another justification is the imminence of the threat, that the threat may not be immediate. There can be a long-term threat also. Even for that, an anticipatory self-defense exercise can be taken up, and there is the rhetoric of Iran in words of Israel that they want to destroy Israel. And the last justification given is that there has been a failure of the diplomatic alternatives and there is no other choice left apart from the all-out attack. But the arguments against the present strike are more. For example, it has been a violation of Article 2, Subclause 4 of the UN Charter. It allows for self-defense, but the attack except for the self-defense or except for the United Nations sanctioned actions are illegal. Now, this cannot be justified in the name of self-defense as there was no imminent threat, there was no immediate preceding attack by Iran upon Israel, and also there were no UN sanctioned actions as well. Also, it has no legal basis for the preemptive strike, as it is saying that it is preemptive just on the basis that it is a potential future threat and there has been no actual armed attack from the side of Iran. And imminence has been too broadly interpreted. Rather, the imminence means that it should be temporarily proximate. It should be about to happen, but there was no such imminent threat from the state of Iran, and there has been a risk of escalation as well. The escalation has already happened, and the unilateral strikes based on conjecture are setting a dangerous precedent. And the earlier precedent, for example, the US attacks upon Venezuela, that is now being continued. And there are proportionality concerns as well. What if tomorrow another superpower also takes up a similar preemptive strike? Who is to stop them? Now, what will be the impact of this war upon India? This will have adverse economic impact. For example, the export of several commodities from India will be adversely impacted. We export, for example, 20% of our basmati rice to Iran, about 1.2 million tons, which will be impacted, and therefore it causes the international prices to drop. And in June 2025 itself, the international prices dropped by $100 per ton, and therefore the stocks in India also start piling up. We also export tea to Iran, about 20,000 tons of tea to Iran. Not only to Iran, the exports to other countries, for example, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, will also be affected because the exports happen through Iran, because Pakistan does not allow us a land route. At the same time, the freight cost will also increase. If the Strait of Hormuz is choked by Iran, the freight cost will increase. At the same time, the fuel cost will also increase. And the risk insurance premiums also increase. Because of the closure of airspaces, the threat of strikes, the threat of instability across the Middle East region, the risk insurance premiums increase. And there is the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz as well. And that adds about 15 to 20 days of shipping times through the alternate routes. And the shipping costs, they also increase by 40 to 50%. Even greater impact on India will be the impact on energy security. For example, the clash between Iran and Israel, it will lead to the spike in the oil prices. Why? Because the Strait of Hormuz, which is a choke point, it will be closed, and therefore the transport of about 20 million barrels per day, that is about 1/5 of the global petroleum liquids consumption, that will be blocked. And therefore about 84% of the crude coming to Asia, that will be blocked, as Tehran is a major supplier to China, and if China does not get the oil from Iran, it will buy from elsewhere, which will drive up the international oil prices again. And India does not buy much from Tehran, but the global oil price shocks, that will adversely affect the Indian import bills. Therefore, even further escalation, it can bar the access to the Suez Canal and the Red Sea as well, adversely impacting India's energy security therefore. Now let's also discuss the significance of Israel, because Prime Minister Modi visited Israel just before Israel launched the attack on Iran. Israel is significant for us because we have defense cooperation. For example, we import various defense equipments from Israel, including the Falcon warning and control system, various drones, including the Heron, Searcher 2 drone, Harop drones, etc., and also the anti-aircraft missile systems like Spider. We are also co-developing defense equipments with Israel. For example, the Barak 8 missile. Geoeconomically as well, Israel is significant for us. For example, we have significant trade in fiscal year 2022-2023. Excluding defense itself, the trade between the two countries was more than $10 billion, out of which Indian exports was more than $8 billion. So it is a significant market for us. And we are Israel's second largest trading partner in Asia. We export pearls, precious metals to Israel, automotive, diesel, machinery and electrical equipment, textiles, agricultural products, etc. to Israel. And there is cooperation across I2U2, India, Middle East, Europe, Economic Corridor, etc. And we can learn from Israel regarding water security, because Israel has expertise in desalination, drip irrigation, wastewater recycling, etc. And this also shows our West Asian balancing strategy, as we are able to uphold our strategic autonomy. And regarding diaspora as well, Israel is significant as India has historically welcomed the Jews. They have contributed towards the enrichment of Indian culture. There are 26,000 Indians living in Israel and about 85,000 Jews of Indian origin in Israel. Now, what have been the outcomes of the Prime Minister's visit to Israel? In the technology domain, there has been the announcement of the establishment of a Center of Excellence, the Indo-Israel Cyber Center of Excellence. An MOU was signed for the combined ethical AI development, artificial intelligence, and the sharing of the AI and geophysical technologies for the sustainable mineral exploration. In the economic domain, there was the exploration of the UPI integration so as to use UPI for the cross-border remittances, and also the agreement between the International Financial Services Center Authority in India and the Israel Securities Authority for sharing of technology, sharing of the best practices regarding the fintech, financial technology, and the regtech, that is the regulatory technology, and also the setting up of the India-Israel Innovation Center for Agriculture. Now there is a mains practice question as well. Examine the impact of Iran-Israel conflict on India's energy security and regional diplomacy. In this context, analyze the strategic significance of Israel for India. Please try to write it.